The Lucian dawn settled into a wide, cautious orbit around the failing star. From space, the sun looked bruised, its once golden surface now fractured with dark swirls and unstable flares. Time was short. Mara's fingers danced over the interface. At her station, adjusting the light sensors to better match the cavalry wavelength patterns. "It's a language, Captain, not just random memory storage. This was designed to be read by someone." "Designed for us?" First Officer Hale asked. Mara shook her head. "Not us, exactly, but maybe someone like us. Someone who still looks at a flicker in the dark and sees meaning." Aya folded her arms, staring at the stream of symbols now projected above the bridge. Console. "Then that's what we'll do. Find meaning." The Lucian Dawn was a scientific and exploratory vessel, compact, fast, and equipped with the best sensors humanity had left. But even its cutting-edge systems strained against the storms of this decaying system. Static fuzzed the outer displays, and warnings blinked from every engineering panel. Down in the engine bay, Chief Engineer Thomas Yari wiped his brow and adjusted, a flow regulator that had begun vibrating from radiation stress. "Tell the bridge we've got about 72 hours of safe radiation exposure before our shielding starts to cook us," he muttered, glancing at his assistant. "We'll hold, but it's going to cost us." The young assistant, Wren, nodded. "They're risking everything for a dying archive." Thomas looked up at the ceiling. "For more than that. They're risking it because someone has to care. That's what makes us human." Back on the bridge, Mara's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, I think I found the beginning." She expanded a light pattern across the central display, a loop, elegant in its repetition, like a spiral galaxy seen from above. Within the pattern, glowing points appeared and vanished in sequence. Each point pulsed at a precise interval. Rhythm, cadence, story. "They're telling us who they were," Mara said, voice quiet. "This is history. And emotion, not just data." One of the pulses slowed, then flashed rapidly, like a heartbeat speeding up. Next came another shape, blooming outward and collapsing. A solar event. Aya watched as the meaning unfolded. "Their son died before their people did," Mara nodded. "And they knew it would. They didn't fight it. They turned their last energy toward sending their legacy out into the stars." There was a long silence across the bridge. Aya finally spoke, her voice even. "We do the same. Transmit our position to the Exodian fleet. Let them know the mission is underway." Hale hesitated. "There's a risk the signal might attract others, scavengers or worse." "If this is the last record of an entire people," Aya replied, "then the risk is worth it." The message was sent. Below deck, engineers reinforced the hull for long-term exposure. Scientists gathered around Mara's terminal, helping translate patterns into a language the ship could archive. And in the quiet of her quarters later that night, Aya recorded her log. Day 1. Contact established with the Cavalry's light archive. They speak through flickers and flashes, but the feeling is clear. This was their final act of hope. They reached for someone who might still care. She looked into the lens, tired but steady. "I don't know what we'll find here, but I know we won't leave until we've carried their light as far as it can go." She ended the recording, leaned back, and stared out the narrow window at the broken star. In the vast cold of space, a message from one dying people had reached another that refused to give up. The last spark had not gone out yet. The cavalry system was quiet in the way only dying things could be. No ships moved, no signals called out. Only the trembling of a star nearing collapse, and the delicate thread of light that pulsed with silent meaning. Mara Ansel sat in the dim glow of her station aboard the Lucian Dawn, eyes fixed on the evolving light stream. Around her, the rest of the bridge crew worked in low voices, careful not to break the stillness. The cavalry archive was unfolding slowly, line by line like a story that had waited generations to be told. She spoke softly into her headset. "Captain, I think I've isolated the primary sequence. It's not just memory, it's structured, almost like a ceremony." Captain Aya Wren leaned forward from her chair, focused. "Meaning? It's how they say goodbye." On screen, geometric light patterns shifted again. This time, they formed a ring, then a spiral. Then that spiral unraveled into dozens of threads, each branching in different directions before fading. "It's not grief," Mara said after a long pause. "It's release, as if they're giving their history away with peace." Aya nodded, thoughtful. "And we're the ones they chose to receive it." Down in the hangar bay, Engineer Thomas Yari stood beside the hastily constructed memory lattice. It was a web of prisms and data nodes designed to capture and refract the incoming light signals into stable formats. Part science, part intuition. A machine built for understanding something far older than human technology. He ran a systems check as his assistant Wren secured the final optical nodes. "You ever wonder?" Tomas said, watching the slow pulse of the captured signal ripple across the device. "Why we're the ones out here, not some advanced species. Just us. Tired, barely holding it together humans?" Wren smiled faintly. "Because we keep showing up, even when we're not sure we can." Thomas chuckled. "That's what I keep telling myself, too." Back on the bridge, another pattern emerged. This one different. Faster. Urgent. "Captain, this section's new," Mara said. "It's a warning." Everyone tensed. "What kind of warning?" Aya asked. Mara squinted at the readouts. They knew the star was unstable, but they miscalculated. It's degrading faster than expected. They thought they had years, maybe decades. They had only weeks. The ship rocked gently as a tremor passed through the system. The star was flaring again, a pulse of radiation blooming from its core like a final breath. "We have 2, maybe 3 days, before the next burst reaches lethal intensity," said First Officer Hale, checking the radiation monitors. "We'll need to shelter during the worst of it. Or get out." Aya stood. "We stay until the archive is complete." The room was quiet, but no one argued. That night, as the ship's lights dimmed for cycle shift, Mara sat alone with the archive. Through the projection window, the failing star pulsed like a dying heartbeat. She watched the symbols scroll across her terminal, and one particular phrase caught her attention. It repeated more than the others, embedded in multiple sequences. "What is that?" she whispered. She ran the translation again, cross-checking with the linguistic database she had built over the last few days. Slowly, the phrase resolved into something close to meaning. "We send this light, not to be remembered, but to be carried." Mara closed her eyes, the message settling into her like a memory that wasn't hers. The cavalry hadn't asked for help. They hadn't asked for pity. They had only asked one thing of the stars: carry it forward. When morning came, the next light sequence arrived. It was heavier, full of encoded science, culture, structure. Not just a goodbye, but a gift. The beginnings of something greater. Aya gathered the crew in the main chamber. This is more than a farewell. They're entrusting us with a part of who they were. And we're going to honor that, no matter what. Outside, the star trembled again, a warning of the fire still to come. But inside the Lucian dawn, the light of another civilization was being caught, held, and preserved by the last ones who still believed that no story should end without being shared. The warning came too late. A solar tremor hit the Lucian dawn like a slow-moving shockwave. The hull groaned as energy coursed over its shielding, flickering the lights and temporarily blanking the viewports. Deep within the system, the dying star convulsed again, ejecting waves of radiation into the dark. In the engine room, Thomas Yari clutched the railing as the lights dimmed. "We just took a direct pulse," he growled into the comm. "Shields are holding for now, but we've got structural fatigue building fast." Captain Aya Wren's voice came through calm but tight. "How bad?" Thomas glanced at the readings. The numbers were worse than he expected. "If we don't reinforce the outer plates manually, we'll lose heat shielding within 20 hours. Send the repair team." "I'll go myself," Thomas said. "I built this ship to survive things like this." Aya paused. "Take someone with you." "I've got Wren," Thomas replied. "We'll move fast." On the bridge, Mara worked without pause. The archive had shifted again. The cavalry signal, once calm and ceremonial, had become fractured. Sections skipped, others repeated. The dying star's outbursts were distorting the message, corrupting pieces of the data before they could be decoded. "We're losing parts of it," she said, frustrated. "I can isolate some segments, but the deeper records are embedded in layers of encoded structure I've never seen before." "Prioritize what you can," Aya said. "We may not get another full cycle." Mara frowned at the latest sequence. It was different from the rest, a cascading visual pattern like falling threads of light. It reminded her of tears. She zoomed in, parsing the signal line by line. This wasn't history or science. It was something else. Emotion. The cavalry had encoded their grief, their hopes, their mistakes. This segment showed vast cities of light unraveling as the atmosphere collapsed. Children watching from deep shelters as their skies dimmed. A gathering of their final counsel, not in anger or fear, but acceptance. "We waited too long," the phrase repeated over and over. "We believed time was mercy. We learned it was silence." Mara whispered the words aloud. They weren't just saying goodbye. They were warning us. Below deck, Thomas and Wren reached the exposed hull. The outer plating shimmered faintly, under the pressure of the storm, rippling with the aftershock's energy. They worked quickly, securing brackets and insulating joints. Then a hiss. A seam split near the exhaust valve. Heat surged through the corridor. "Get back!" Thomas shouted, shoving Wren toward the inner bulkhead. The force of the heat wave sent Thomas sprawling. He landed hard, his arm catching the edge of a panel. Pain shot through his body, but he didn't stop. The breach would cook the engine if not sealed. Wren turned back, panic in his eyes. "Thomas! Go!" Thomas barked. "Seal the door! You can finish from the inside." Wren hesitated for a single heartbeat, then obeyed. Thomas dragged himself to the valve and engaged the emergency lock. The seal hissed shut. The heat faded, but the pain didn't. Back on the bridge, an alert flashed across the system. "Engineering breach," Hale read. "Pressure stabilized. 1 injured." Aya stood immediately. "Tell medical to stand by." Wren returned 10 minutes later, face pale. "Thomas is alive, hurt but stable. He saved the reactor." Aya gave a short nod. "Noted. He'll be honored in the report. We're not losing anyone without meaning." Mara looked up from her screen. "He didn't just save the ship. He saved the archive." Outside the windows, the star pulsed again. Fainter this time. Slower. Its fire was almost out, but aboard the Lucian Dawn, the light was still being received, carried, preserved. Not because it was easy, because someone had to, and humanity had decided it would be them. The archive shifted again. This time, it brought a voice. It wasn't speech in the human sense. The cavalry had no vocal cords, no written alphabet. But through the layered rhythm of light pulses and spectral color waves, something like a story began to unfold. Not just recorded data, but intention. Mara Ansel sat cross-legged on the floor of the observation chamber, surrounded by soft white reflections cast from the ship's light lattice. The prism arrays projected the message in 3 dimensions, swirling points of light forming a vast glowing sphere. A single strand moved independently from the others. "This one is personal," she whispered. She tapped into the translator. Core. The AI rendered the patterns as a gently flowing visual display. The image that emerged was unmistakably alien. Tall, luminous figures with translucent bodies and delicate limbs that seemed woven from glass and light. The cavalry. The central figure glowed more brightly than the others. It bowed slightly, and the patterns around it pulsed with gravity and sadness. Not a leader, Mara said quietly. A witness. The cavalry's light changed colors in slow, mournful ripples. Images formed behind it. Cities of crystal towers slowly darkening, oceans retreating as the sun dimmed, and fields where glowing plants folded inward forever. Then, a moment of silence, total stillness in the projection, and then another image, a council chamber of light. No arguments, no shouting, just stillness, as if they were all waiting for something that never came. Mara leaned in. They knew the end was coming, but they chose not to stop it. Aya Ren watched from the doorway, arms folded. Why? Mara exhaled slowly. Because they didn't believe change was possible. Their culture had reached a point where movement was seen as disruption. Stability became more important than survival. And when it was too late, all they could do was record what they had lost. The cavalry message continued. But now the patterns slowed. The colors faded into a gentle dusk. Then the words appeared again in translation. We reached for the light, but we did not hold it. Aya looked at the projection, her voice steady. And now they're asking us to. The next light segment held schematics, cultural structures, art forms, energy systems, and fragments of propulsion design built from light rather than heat, concepts that seemed to blend science and beauty into a single language. It's a gift, Mara said. Not a warning, a hope. They failed to adapt, but they believed someone else could carry what they couldn't. Aya nodded. And that someone is us. Later that day, the crew gathered in the central hub of the Lucian Dawn. The artificial gravity was low to conserve power, and the lights were dimmed, except for the holographic display of the Cavalry Archive, which floated above them like a living constellation. Aya addressed the crew. The Cavalry didn't fall to war or disease or greed. They fell to stillness, to a belief that change wasn't worth the effort. And when they realized what was coming, they used what little time they had to build a legacy they could send into the stars. She let that settle in the silence. We are not here to mourn them. We are here to ensure their light does not vanish. We are not only survivors, we are carriers. The crew nodded, some solemn, some inspired. Then Aya added, There will be more solar instability, and we've already paid in blood to be here. But if even one part of their message endures, then we did not come in vain. As the crew dispersed, Mara stayed behind, watching the fading patterns in the air. One phrase lingered at the end of the newest segment. If you remember us, then we never fully ended. She repeated it aloud, not to the ship, not to the archive, but to the stars, and in that quiet, she felt something ancient and fragile settle into place. They had come to carry the light. Now they were becoming it. The star was breaking. From the bridge of the Lucian Dawn, Aya Ren watched in silence as the outer layers of the Cavalry sun rippled, stretched, then split like fabric torn from the center. A bright coronal mass launched into space, casting ghostly shadows across the shattered ruins of what had once been a thriving civilization. Radiation spike incoming, First Officer Hale reported. It's stronger than any previous flare. We'll need to retreat to the lower decks and seal outer hull compartments. Time to impact? Aya asked. 3 hours. Below them, the memory lattice pulsed steadily. It had captured nearly 70% of the Cavalry archive, but the deepest layer, their final gift, was still locked behind complex spectrographic sequences. Without it, the most advanced parts of their light-based technology would remain forever lost. And with this flare, the archive would be torn apart. We can transmit what we have, Hale suggested. Send the data to the Exodian fleet now. We save what's complete and get out before this star takes us with it. Aya stared at the pulsing archive. It's not complete. That last layer could change everything. Their power systems, their propulsion tech, if there's even a chance it could help the fleet, we have to try. There's no guarantee we'll survive another flare. Our shields are thinning, and the engines still haven't recovered from the last overload. No, she said quietly. Then she turned to Mara. Can we finish the translation before impact? Mara didn't answer at first. She stared at the patterns scrolling across her display. So elegant, so precise. It wasn't just language. It was a kind of farewell encoded in light and knowledge. A final gift wrapped in complexity. Yes, she said at last. If we stay until the last possible moment and reroute processing through the lattice core, we can finish the sequence. Aya looked back at Hale. He hesitated, then gave a slow nod. I'll prep the emergency burn. If we wait too long, we won't have enough thrust to escape the gravity well, but I'll give you as much time as I can. In the lower decks, Thomas Yari, bandaged, limping, supervised the cooling system adjustments. He shouldn't have been out of medbay, but no one stopped him. The ship needed every mind and every hand. We're going to fly through that flare? Wren asked him, disbelief in his voice. Thomas smirked. Not through it, just around the worst of it, like surfing a tsunami without a board. Sounds impossible. Most things worth doing are. Back on the bridge, the light stream accelerated. The final layer unfolded like a flower blooming in reverse, revealing principles of energy conversion, light channeling engines, and power matrices that didn't rely on heat or combustion, but on resonance and precision. It was technology unlike anything humanity had seen. Elegant, efficient, clean, and it could change everything. Final sequence locked, Mara called. Transmitting now. A deep hum ran through the ship as the archive data surged through the comm array and out into space, aimed at the Exodian fleet's deep-range receiver. Transmission away, Hale confirmed. Aya looked up at the view screen. The flare was almost on them now. All hands to bracing stations, she ordered. Prepare for emergency jump. The Lucian Dawn turned, engines groaning as they pushed against the gravity of the collapsing star. The flare grew brighter, stretching across space like a wall of light. Time slowed. Systems overloaded. Hull panels shook. Now, Hale shouted. The engines fired. The ship surged forward, through radiation, through turbulence, through the last remnants of the cavalry's dying light. The archive behind them began to dissolve. The flare consumed everything, but the data had been sent. The light had been carried, and though the Lucian Dawn tumbled, sparking and wounded into open space, the gift had survived. Silence. For nearly 10 minutes after the jump, the Lucian Dawn floated in dark space, unpowered and wounded. Emergency lights blinked faintly along the corridors. The hum of the engines had gone quiet, replaced by the low, rhythmic tone of the reactor cooling systems catching their breath. Captain Aya Wren opened her eyes slowly. Her head ached from the force of the jump. Her seat restraints had left red, lines across her shoulders. Around her, the bridge was dim but intact. "Status!" she rasped. Mara coughed softly, then spoke from her station. "We're out. Radiation levels are dropping. Hull damage on decks 4 and 5. Life support holding." Hale, face bruised but focused, tapped at his console. "No power to main drives. We're drifting." Aya unbuckled her straps and stood. Pain bloomed in her ribs, but she stayed upright. "Casualties?" "Minor injuries throughout," Hale said. "No losses. Somehow." A moment passed in which no one spoke. Then Mara smiled faintly. We made it. Aya nodded once. What about the transmission? Mara tapped into the archive system. Despite the chaos, the message had left the ship in full. The entire Cavalry archive, 73% decoded, including the full final sequence, was now on its way to the Exodian fleet. Clean signal. Full delivery. The fleet should receive it in under 4 days. Aya allowed herself a deep breath. Then we did it. The bridge crew didn't cheer. They didn't clap. But every person let out a breath, relaxed a muscle, or closed their eyes in quiet relief. They had carried the light through fire. Now came the weight. Over the next day, damage control worked non-stop. Thomas, bandaged and limping, directed patchwork repairs from a mobile chair in the engineering bay. I've been on ships that came apart from half this stress, he muttered, inspecting the cracked fusion housing. Wren grinned as he tightened. A coolant line. That's because they weren't built by someone too stubborn to let them fall apart. You're learning, Thomas replied with a weak smile. Up on the bridge, Mara continued parsing fragments of the archive. Even with the bulk of it sent away, the light lattice still retained echoes, after-images of the Cavalry's final thoughts. One phrase kept appearing in the residual data, like the refrain of a song echoing across time. What we cannot hold, we pass on. It was more than a farewell. It was a purpose. The next morning, a signal appeared on long-range scans. A slow pulse, steady and familiar. Aya stood and walked to the main console, her face unreadable until the data loaded. The second origin, Hale said behind her. Fleet command. They heard us, Aya whispered. The fleet's signal confirmed full receipt of the archive. It also included a short message. No official orders, no redirection. Just 3 words. You carried well. Mara sat back in her chair, blinking hard against sudden emotion. Thomas let out a low chuckle over the comm. Even Hale, usually as rigid as the deck plating, allowed himself a quiet smile. Aya turned to the crew. We've done more than survive, she said. We've become the bridge between one fallen world and whatever comes next. This archive, it isn't just memory. It's potential. She looked out the viewport, at the distant stars slowly returning to view. There are other lights out there, other civilizations on the edge of silence, and if this mission proves anything, it's that no story has to end alone. A quiet agreement moved through the crew like gravity, subtle but inescapable. They had come to bear witness. They had stayed to preserve a legacy. And now, with battered hulls and flickering lights, they had become the ones who would go further. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as those who carried the stories too precious to forget. In the shadow of one dying star, they had found a new fire, and they would carry it again and again into the dark. The Lucian Dawn limped toward the rendezvous point. Its main thrusters flickered uncertainly, guiding the ship on a slow arc toward the Exodian fleet's outer perimeter. Though battered, its course was true. Inside, a quiet sense of purpose had taken root among the crew. They weren't returning in triumph. They were returning as witnesses. Aya Wren stood on the observation deck, watching as the stars crawled past the window. She hadn't slept much since the final flare. The weight of what they had recovered still pressed against her thoughts. She wasn't thinking of strategy or reports now. She was thinking of the Cavalry, of a people who had died with dignity and sent their last words into the void. Behind her, footsteps echoed softly. Mara approached, holding a tablet. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were brighter than usual. We finished reviewing the final layer of the archive, she said. It's more than we expected. Aya turned. They didn't just send us a goodbye, Mara continued. They sent us the foundation of their next age. Plans they never had time to build. Ideas that could reshape how we live, travel, even how we think about energy. Aya took the tablet and scanned through the schematics. The cavalry's light-based power systems were incredibly advanced, compact, self-sustaining, clean. Technologies Earth had barely dreamed of. These could power entire colonies, Aya said. Mara nodded. They designed them to last without supervision. Systems meant to support life long after the builders were gone. Aya looked back at the stars. They built their legacy for strangers, she said, and trusted us to finish it. Later, in the central chamber, Thomas Yari joined a gathering of the senior staff. His movements were slow, still favoring his left side, but his expression carried a spark of pride. Hale spoke first. Fleet Command has assigned us a new mission. A pause moved through the room. Mara leaned forward. Already? We've earned rest, Hale said, but Command believes the best way to honor what we've found is to use it. The Cavalry Archive is already being reviewed by research, vessels, but the tech is only part of the story. They want us to trace the signal origin. Aya raised an eyebrow. You mean the first archive node? Hale nodded. The Cavalry launched dozens of them before their sun failed. We found one, but there may be others. Thomas folded his arms. They scattered pieces of themselves across the stars. Mara looked up from her notes. If the others are still active, they might contain more than data. They might have guidance, instructions, maybe even survivors in stasis. Aya didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, We began this mission carrying a light that wasn't ours. Maybe it's time we became something more. Not just messengers, not just historians. Something else. Carriers of legacy, builders of bridges, guardians of memory. The Lucian dawn reached the fleet 3 days later. What waited for them wasn't a celebration, but something better. Quiet purpose. Engineers from the Second Origin boarded to assist with repairs. Scientists arrived to begin integrating the archive data. And messages flowed in from other vessels, all asking one question. How do we help carry this forward? In the coming weeks, the fleet's course would change. Ships would split off to explore distant systems. Others would begin constructing the first prototype of the Cavalry's power lattice. But aboard the Lucian Dawn, something deeper had already shifted. The crew no longer saw themselves as just explorers of space. They had become stewards of what came before, and what could still come after. Aya stood in the observation bay again, watching as the stars moved more brightly now. This time, she wasn't watching for danger. She was looking for the next light waiting to be found, the Lucian. Dawn drifted toward the outer edge of the Exodian fleet, now a vital part of a greater movement. The initial aftermath of their mission had been quiet. Ships and stations working together to recover what could be salvaged from the Cavalry's light. But as the weeks passed, an unmistakable energy filled the air. They weren't just reconstructing the past. They were preparing for a future no one had thought possible. Aya Wren stood on the bridge once more, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. There was something different about this place. The weight of history had shifted. The burden of loss was still there. But now it was accompanied by something else. Hope. Captain, Mara called from her station. Her voice filled with an excitement Aya hadn't heard in weeks. I think we've cracked it. Aya turned, raising an eyebrow. Cracked what? Mara gestured to the holomap, a swirling display of Cavalry schematics. The patterns were starting to make sense, the complex light-channeling technologies coming together into a coherent system. The lattice structure we've been working on. The one they use to channel energy without combustion. We've begun replicating the core principles here, and it works. We're generating stable energy using only light. Aya's heart quickened. This wasn't just a breakthrough. It was a transformation. You're sure? Aya asked, stepping closer. The glowing arcs of the map bent and twisted, showing a world of possibilities. Mara's eyes shone. We're still calibrating it, but yes, the prototype is already stable. And if we refine it, we can scale it up. Entire colonies, even ships, can run on light alone. No fuel, no exhaust, no waste. Aya looked out at the stars, at the space beyond. This wasn't just about their survival anymore. This was about shaping a future for every species, for every being who had ever dreamed of reaching the stars, without burning them. She took a deep breath, then turned to her crew. We carry the cavalry light not as a relic, but as a revolution, she said, her voice steady with conviction. We will not let their story end in silence. We will take it forward. But she knew the journey wasn't just about technology. The cavalry had been brilliant in their innovation, but they had faltered at the crucial moment. Their unwillingness to adapt had brought their end. Humanity, by contrast, had learned to evolve with every hardship, every setback. It was that resilience, that refusal to accept stagnation, that made humanity not just survivors, but builders. The crew stood in silence for a long moment, considering the weight of her words. But then, slowly, they began to nod. We move forward, Thomas said quietly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Not for us, but for them. The days that followed were filled with the frenetic energy of new beginnings. The fleet grew, incorporating the cavalry technology into its own systems, and other ships ventured to different systems, seeking out the last traces of the cavalry archives. Their mission had only just begun. The legacy of the cavalry, far from fading into nothing, was becoming the cornerstone of a new age. Aya often stood alone in the observation bay, watching the stars. In the dark stretches of space, there were still many unknowns. But now, when she looked at the black sky, she didn't see emptiness. She saw potential, opportunity, a galaxy full of life, still untapped. Then one evening, just as the first light of the distant sun began to touch the hull of the Lucian dawn, a communication arrived. A message from the Exodian command. It was brief and to the point, but Aya knew the significance before the words even appeared on her screen. The message simply read, "Prepare for the next phase. You are to lead the expedition to the cavalry, homeworld." Aya closed her eyes and smiled. It wasn't just a mission. It was the beginning of something far larger, something that would stretch across the stars, bringing light where darkness had once reigned. Humanity had always been a species of contradictions, fragile yet unbreakable, small yet infinite. But now, they had proven something deeper than survival. They had proven that no matter how dark the galaxy became, they would rise to carry the light. And from that light, they would build. The journey had only just begun.